All right, awesome. Let's get this thing rolling. Talking about the agenda here. Now, of course, this thing is not going to work, or it will. Since we do software development as a profession, it only makes sense for us to be professionals, right? The whole idea behind hobbyist programmers, forget that, right? If you're here tonight, I'm pretty sure you're not a hobbyist programmer, right? You're taking time off of your busy schedule to come out here to listen to somebody speak about something with a funny accent, right? During your work day. So you better be a professional about it. You have to be careful about what you do. That's your profession. Be a professional. So that's what we're going to be talking about here. One step towards that goal of being a professional, there are many other things you have to take into account, but writing clean code is one of them. Other ones would be, improving yourself, doing what you are doing right now, coming out to a presentation, trying to learn and improve your skills. That's another thing that you would be doing, continuous improvement. This session is going to be loaded with my personal rant, opinion about things, right? So it's a lot based on my personal experience after doing this for 18 years, right? So I think I've learned a little bit, and I'm going to be sharing a little bit of what I've learned here. Now, remember that, keep in mind that opinions may always change, right? So things that I'm going to be mentioning here today is how I feel today about the code that I write. But if you ask me a year from now, my opinion may have changed about some of the things that I'm saying here. And maybe next year I can come back and say, those things that I said, they still apply. Those other things, I don't know what the heck I was smoking at that time, even though I don't smoke a thing. Right? So that's good. We got those out of the way. Oops. Let me flip back. This thing is not working well, so I'll probably just keep it. Right, so the idea is, if I go around and I ask people, how long have you been doing software development? I mean, like right here. How many of you have been writing software for less than 5 years? A couple of you. Between 5 and 10 years. More than 10 years. I'm sorry for all of you. I actually joke, right? Because I've been doing this for 18 years and I'm pretty happy about it. My main point here is, have you been doing this for 20 years, doing year 1 for 20 years? Right? Meaning, are you still writing code today the same way you used to write 20 years ago? Because if that's the case, I don't care if you've been doing this for 20 years or 100 years. Right? To me, it's like you're a kid writing software. I'm sorry, that's how I feel. Right? It's kind of like having, a 25-year-old writing letters as a 5-year-old, using the same vocabulary, the same handwriting, right? The same, language composition that you're like, what the heck is this doing? It seems like a 5-year-old and it's a 25-year-old. So sometimes I look at code and I'm like, there's no way that an adult could be writing this piece of software here, right? I just cannot imagine that, right? So that's one of the things when I'm interviewing people and, the guys go,
yeah, I've been doing this for 25 years. Who are you to tell me what to do?
Like, dude, if you've been doing the first year for 25 years, I don't care, right? You're not a good programmer as far as I'm concerned. I like this cartoon here, right? The only valid measurement of code quality, WTFs per minute. So this is good code, and there's bad code. You just have to keep track counting, right? That's how you measure, if you have good code or bad code. I just love this. And I got this off of a book. I'm going to mention the book later. But I just knew I would love the book because this was like the first page of the book. I was like, oh, this is awesome. This is right up my alley, man. That's speaking my language. Right? Because, of course, since English is not my primary language, that's how we learn a language, right? Always with the bad words first. So anything that sounds like bad English, that's how I've learned it. So what is clean code? Can anybody tell me what clean code actually is? Throw ideas out there.
Any code the other humans can understand other than the computer.
Any code that other human beings can understand other than a computer. That's a fair statement. Anybody else?
Code that's self-documenting and easy to trace.
Code that's self-documenting and easy to trace. I like that.
Reusable and extensible.
Reusable, extensible. You guys are sharp, man. What the heck am I doing here? Right? So, an author of a book, Robert Martin, the book that I'm going to be mentioning later, he asked this question to a lot of, people out there, and he's heard things like, elegant and efficient, looks like it was written by someone who cares, right? Not somebody who just throws code together and say, I just need to get out at 5, I don't care what the code looks like, right? Can be read and enhanced, contains no duplication, simple and direct. Each routine you read turns out to be pretty much what you expected, right? So if you see this method name and you have some expectation judging by the name of the method, and then you look at the implementation code and it's like, yeah, that's exactly what I expected this method to do. That's clean code, right? And then finally, it passes the 12 burrito rule. Has anybody heard of that rule there? Probably not, right? Because I came up with that at 3:30 in the morning. And I don't know what I was thinking, but the idea was 12 burrito rule is something that I came up with, which is, that face that somebody's going to make after he ate 12 burritos. It's like, look, ooh, what the heck is that? So if somebody looks at your code and like, ooh, right? You want to pass that rule. I know, people should read and go like this. Oh, instead of, right? That's what you want to strive for. Right? So, how should we write code? Right? You guys like that, right? That's awesome. Computers don't care how you write code. Right? Like the gentleman brought up. You need to write things so that either yourself or other programmers can understand. For the computer, it doesn't matter if you're going to declare a string like that. A4234, blah, 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 blah. It looks terrible. For the computer, that's just as good as, if that was named error message or name or whatever. So make sure that you write something that people are going to understand. The computer does not care how you're going to be naming things. Should I just then comment my badly named variables? Maybe that's the alternative, right? I just create, it's like, well, no comment there, right? Because some people, that's what they do, right? The name of the variable does not make sense, and the person is going to compensate for that by applying comments. Like, why don't you spend a little more, time trying to come up with a better name for your variable, for crying out loud, right? It shouldn't be that hard. I mean, it's not that hard for myself, who, can barely speak the language here. So, for instance, this simple code here, and I'm going to tell you who wrote it. I did, right? A couple of years ago. I went back this week just because I said, instead of just pointing out what other people wrote, let me get my own code and put it under the microscope and see how much I've messed this thing up, right? And then I look at that and I see the, the first line there that says, indicates if setting is supported. And then there is a supported property in there. Or variable. And then there's a for loop, and then it says, look for the setting through all sources. What a concept. And then check if setting is supported. If source.is setting supported, And then check if source is read-only. If source is read-only. It's like, no kidding, Sherlock, really? Right? Do I have to go through all that? I look at that and I'm like, I've eaten at least 4 burritos there, right? That's my face, like,
This is not lying. Comments lie and code tells the truth.
Exactly, right? So all those spots, whenever I see code like this that I wrote myself, I imagine like having this little story that has a narrator that tells me, Johnny says hi to Suzy. Hi, Suzy. Suzy says hello to Johnny and asks whether he wants to play. Hello, Johnny. Do you want to play? Wait, there's more. Johnny excitedly says yes. Yes! Suzy, not as excited, just says, cool. Cool. That's how I feel when I read that kind of code. There is a narrator telling me each step of the way what's going on there. I can read the name of a variable. I can read when you have if something dot is supported. I can read that. You don't have to tell me what Johnny is saying, right? I want to see something more succinct where you say, hi Suzy, hello Johnny, do you want to play? Yes, cool. Right, ba boom, and then get, life going, right? So continue on with that. You may see some samples like, oh, this makes me laugh, right? So I have these private fields there with comments that say for internal use only. Really? It's a private field and it's for internal use only? Huh? Who would have thought of that? Right? Brilliant. Right? Brilliant. One more burrito to the count. Are you guys keeping track of that? Right? Yeah. It will only get worse. Right? Now this is a little bit better because now it says on the first one, gets reference to the type of business entity being tested. Well, I can see, by the name of the field, I could infer that. Or stores the simple scenario state. And the name of the field is simple scenario state. Okay, I can get that. Gets the simple scenario state. Yeah, I can see all of that. The name of the darn variable tells me that. Right, and then, but the thing is, gets the simple scenario state, value the simple scenario. How many of you have seen code like this? I mean, I see that every day, right? And again, this one, I wrote this one. Probably like 3 years ago. I look back and say, what the heck was I thinking, man? And by then I was already programming for 15 years, for crying out loud. Right? Like, the other day I was talking to a buddy of mine, so that one was not mine, and he was discussing, I have now this policy where we have to comment everything, not just public members, but also private. And then he showed me something like this. What is the problem with that little bit of code in there?
What is it?
Somebody said it's not setting, or I think I heard that. Right? Because the comment says set some value. When you look at that through, say, IntelliSense is going to tell you, when you have some value, it's going to tell you, sets some value. It lies. It's a read-only field. Nobody's going to be setting this, right? So what's the point of having that in there? Makes no sense, right? No sense whatsoever. Don't put that in there. It's just junk in the middle of your code, right? So one more burrito, maybe two, because this was this other one I found out another day. That one, I wrote the original code. I didn't write the comment. The comment says, the following if statement ended up using an unassigned field, so it could never be true. Okay, why you person didn't delete that? Why do you have to keep that code in there that didn't work to begin with, commented out like this? What's the point?
You're terrified if you change it won't work anymore.
Yeah, exactly. What's that? If we were not using source control, which is not the case, right? Keeping code commented out is a mistake to begin with. Why do we do that? We used to keep code commented out in there when we didn't have source control. Ever since we started using source control, delete it. Anything that you're commenting out, delete it, right? Oh, what if I need it back? That's what you use source control for, right? And please tell me that everybody's using source control these days, right? Yeah, right? Oh, geez. I feel really sorry for those of you who are not, right? 2 more burritos on that one. Now, this one was priceless. Read it. Right? So it's an event handler for the on-paint event, and then read the comment. Paint event handler. Right? Not only don't I need comment in there because I can read it. I know that it's an event handler because it follows a pattern on paint, right? And it takes in an event argument. Therefore, it's an event handler. You don't have to tell me, you get a typo like that, pain event handler. Yeah, it's painful to read this, right? Needless.
So you did a hard time writing assembler and expressing
Right, exactly. Right. So here's another thing. I work with this tool on the side showing me code metrics about the code that I'm working on, right? Showing cyclomatic complexity and other things like this. Last year I was working on this project where I put some very nice architecture in place for one of the modules, and I've turned that over to other developers, outsourced developers. A few days ago, when I was putting together material for this presentation, I've run across the latest version of this code base that somebody else changed. So at the time when I turned this over to the developers, you would see that like the biggest cyclomatic complexity that I had there was 8. Not bad, right? Well, I got this code back and then I saw this. It's like 51 for cyclomatic complexity. If you're not familiar with the term, it essentially means that you have 51 different branches that you can go through inside a single method. Which means if you want to write unit tests for that, you're going to need to write 51 tests for a single method. I was like, man, ouch. Right there, my smelly detector went off. I've been thinking about creating this device, right? You know when you go to like amusement parks and you have the 4D experience and you sit there and you're watching this movie and then they spray water at you and, you know, wind and all that. I thought I could create this device that I attach to every developer's computer, and then whenever you get into like smelly code, that bad smell comes out of your computer. Huh? Now that would be awesome, right? Because now we would go like, I think Joe's here. Right? So nobody wants to be that guy. So they start being a little more cautious about their code. Right? They want to smell nice. Even though we are programmers, we don't wash every day, but, you know, maybe. So let's actually look at this code because I have to share that with people. It's just that bad. There is a big switch statement in there, yes. And more than that, unfortunately. I think it's this one. Yeah, let me bring it back. So I just extracted, because it's for a client's project, I couldn't get the whole class, so I just got the one method that the developer added in there. And again, that one was not mine. So, you know, that's the method. He does, you know, he has his if block, and then he instantiates a bunch of controls, buttons, checkboxes. He sets a few properties on those controls. And then, oops, wait. You see that region right in the middle of the method? Whenever I see a region right inside of a method, I feel for the worst. I just know that I'm going to be like having that 12 burrito feel, kind of like, oh, I don't want to look. Exactly. Right, so let me expand this, and then you start seeing, okay, if that variable not null, and now here, for those of you into solid, what is that, or which principle is that a violation of? Right? I'm within this one method and I'm saying if some object is of this type, do something. List off. Right? List off. Because when you keep looking, and for those of you not familiar, the idea is within this polymorphic method, details pane should be replaceable by its parent. I shouldn't have to know exactly what type it is so that I can use it. Right, by doing this kind of check. So if it's that type, do a bunch of stuff here. Else if it's another type, do another stuff there. Else if, you see how many branches the guy started adding there with all sorts of logic? And then if in a tab page, if the object there is not null, right? And it keeps going, and it doesn't get any better, I can tell you that much. Right? If. Look at how many, you see the arrowhead pattern, the more you see indentation, the more burritos you're gonna feel like you've eaten, right? And then of course there's a switch statement. Yeah, I mean, no bad code goes without a switch statement in there, right? You just take that for granted. I mean, you've got multi-levels of if blocks. You have to have a switch statement there somewhere, right? So it does that. There's more if, right? There's more if, right? And it doesn't get any better. Really, it doesn't matter how many years you've been doing. If you look at this code and you're like, oh, it's okay, it does what it's supposed to. I mean,
Money back.
it's. And what bothers me tremendously is that, when I look at code like this, I get angry. And I'm like this laid back dude. I'm Brazilian, for crying out loud. I'm all about party, right? But when I look at this, man, I cannot control myself. If it was written by somebody coming out of college, they don't know any better, okay. But when that comes out of a developer that says, yeah, I do this for a living, I am a professional developer, and then I look at code like this, it's like, really? I mean, really, can't you create smaller methods for each one of those branches? Tell me by the name of the method what that branch is doing. In order to understand this code, I would have to print it out and try to follow all the branches, and it's nonsense, right? The price that you pay for maintaining such code, it's very expensive. That's what people have to understand. Writing code, that's cheap, right? You use code generator, you use microcode generators like CodeRush, ReSharper. That's cheap. Understanding code that's there, that you may have written yourself a couple of months ago, understanding what it does and changing it, that's expensive. The more complicated, the more expensive it is. Right? That's why some applications don't see version 2. The version 2 of that app doesn't see the light of the day. Because version 1 was so poor, poorly built, that when you actually have to change it to do version 2, it's like, I don't even know where to start. I'm going to have to do what? Delete, start all over. That's what all of us developers do. We say, no, I can't work with this. I'm going to have to rewrite from scratch. We can't afford that anymore. Back in the days, maybe. Nowadays, we can't afford to rewrite everything from scratch.
So is there a tool that can chapter code to make sure that you are following solid?
That you are following solid, not that I know of, but you have tools that are going to point you out to things like methods that are ridiculously long, methods that may be using too many classes, right? Like ndepend is a tool that's going to give you all sorts of metrics, like the class cohesiveness, whether it's loosely coupled, whether it's too tightly coupled to other types, how many assemblies does the class depend on, things like that. So the way it's spelled is ndepend. That's probably the best tool that's going to give you all sorts of metrics regarding the level of abstraction or uselessness of your code. All right, so that's that. So let me...
Claudio,
Yes?
by the way, that might give you some clues, some areas of your code that need attention, but it won't necessarily tell you how to fix it.
That's correct. Right, so it is going to essentially raise the stinky alarm and say, well, this is bad, this is bad, this is bad. Some tools, some static analysis tools are going to tell you, well, if you have a big, long method, consider creating smaller methods. But for some other stuff, you just need to go out, learn about solid, learn about good design practices, design patterns, and all that. It comes with time, right? It's not easy. I'm not saying here that it's easy, right? Software development is a craft. It is hard, and it's getting harder and harder, right? So you do have to do your homework and, practice more of your craft and try to, improve as much as you can. All right, let's see. Going back to this. Oops, wrong one. Where did that? Oh, here. So functions, as we were looking at functions, they should do one thing. They should do it well. They should do it only. And then one would say, well, so every function should have only one line of code? No. It should do one thing. This one thing may span across 2, 3, 4, half a dozen lines of code. If it goes beyond that, keep an eye on it. Right? So what is the magic number? How many lines of code should you have in your method? It's up to you. Right? You have to look at it and see what the method is doing. Is it doing more than one thing? Right? Is it like going to the database, retrieving, filtering the data, validating the data? It's doing 3 things. Clearly, it's doing 3 things. There are 3 reasons for that method to change. So, okay, let's take that one method and split it into 3 separate steps. It's a lot easier to read. The smaller the method, the easier it's going to be to read. Because us humans, that's how we work. Right? If we get this big journey in front of us, we cannot get our minds around it. We have to bite small chunks. So when people complain, oh, there are too many classes, there is class explosion in this project. Yes, you may be running into that if you are not careful, but for the most part, it just means that you have cohesive classes that are a lot easier to understand what they do. Right? And you don't have to look at code that's not necessary for you to read. Right? Because if I'm dealing, okay, there's a method that does data access, filtering, and validation. And I need to fix that code or enhance that code by, changing a business rule in there. Why would I have to read through the data access part, the filtering part, when all I'm interested in is the validation part of the code? I don't want to care about the rest of the stuff. Right? Let me concentrate on the one piece that I need to understand and change, not everything else. This one, oh geez. This comes from a developer that was doing this for many years and used to teach .NET. That's what scares me, right? Because the person was very, proud of herself for being, a trainer in .NET for many years. And then, okay, man, this code is just priceless. I have to walk around. Man, it doesn't matter how many times I look at it. It always scares me. It's like watching The Exorcist, right? It always it's like, whoa, whoa, right? I mean, look at that part of the code. Since we have 3 screens, so you have a variable or a couple of variables declared as int. And then down here, you do convert to int, some value. And then down here, it's like, what the heck? It's the variable cast to a byte back into an int for each one of them. Why the heck does that even make sense, or is it just me? Maybe is it something specific about English? Because it's beyond me. Now, wait. It gets worse. This one got how many burritos for you? Right? How many? 5. Okay, multiply that by 3 now, because there are 3 methods that look exactly like that. Inside the same class. It's one after the other. Right? I'll tell you, I could keep flipping this back and forth until you find what's different between them. The only things that are different, the name of the method, because one is called getColorValue, the other one is getRowColorValue, the other one is getBackColorValue. One of them, the first one, the main difference is that on this array, she gets it off of, index 1. The other 2, it's index 0. And the second one, the third one, same deal. Like what? What is the thought process behind something like this? I cannot conceive why somebody would do that. Copy paste, right?
They did it once and then they usually
And not seeing the pattern. They really look exactly the same. Can I create a single method that gets called by both? Or since 2 of them look exactly the same? Beyond me, right? Now, I brought this up.
Actually, it makes me question whether those 2 that are exactly the same, if one of them is not actually wrong.
Maybe, yeah.
If you've got an array of colors and maybe one is supposed to be index 0, one is supposed to be 1, and the other 2.
One would never know. And now here's the thing. So I asked the person, so what the heck are you doing here? Right? But I was trying to be polite. Right? I didn't say, what the heck. Maybe I used like some Portuguese term she didn't quite get. Right? People say that Portuguese sounds so beautiful that even when you're cursing, it's like, wow, that sounds romantic. Right? Dirty, romantic, but still. But anyway, so I asked the person, so what's up with this code? Why are you using an array like this? Why don't you use a strongly typed object that gives you those values and give me like a collection of those strongly typed values? That way you don't have all these magic weird indexes in there. And the person was like, oh no, if you go in with a strongly typed object, that's going to just be more expensive, performance, blah, blah, blah. It's like, well, what about all these casts that you're doing here? Doesn't that hurt performance in any case? And also, this was not code for like a small device that needs a lot of processing power. No, this code was getting called like once or twice every other hour, right? So performance, it was not, any reason. The reason was just she couldn't get this idea of stepping away from weird arrays to going to, strongly typed collections. But that's what we get out of some of the .NET schools. Now that one was a big one, right? That one is like, okay, dude, after this one, I have to go for a memory dump. Like, whew, I was holding up, as much as I could, but that one was beyond me, right? So I look at code like this. It's like I'm reading a letter like that, right? That teenagers write nowadays. You look at this like, what? Do I need Indiana Jones to translate those? Right? Hey, sup? You said you would be right back. Oh my gosh! At least say see you later or something. Next time I'll be like, oh really? On you. By the way, let me know if that worked out. I've got to go, so I'll tell you. I'll talk to you later. I had to look that up. I don't know all that. Yeah, I don't know. I had to look that up. So when you read this, it's okay for kids. Right, my daughter's getting into that now. She's been texting me like crazy, with all these things that some of them I'm like, wow, what is that? Right? But when I look at code, I don't want to see that at all. And I'm a fun guy. I like having fun and all. I like jokes. You can joke about my accent and everything, my mess ups in the English language. I don't care. I want to laugh too, but not when I'm reading code that I have to give to clients, right? Because clients come to us thinking that we're going to be professionals because that's the image that they have from us. And then we have to turn over the code to them and they read the code and it looks like a bad letter like this. They're like, yuck, right? It leaves that bad taste in their mouths. Like if that's the professional kind of guy, I don't want to even see the non-professional, right? So you have to take care of that. This one, when you start seeing code with that number of regions, you just know that the class is doing a little bit too much, right? It's doing a little bit too much. It's pulling a lot of weight, right? Look at the name of the class, Simple Edit Window. Right? Not so simple. It inherits from window. So if you follow separated presentation patterns, you know that a window shouldn't have any more code than what's necessary for the UI to function. Everything else goes into presenters, controllers, those things. And then you look at those regions. It is constructor, and it's not even constructors. It's just a constructor that's hidden behind the region. What for? Command handling, properties, miscellaneous, various load status methods, save, verify, before load, new, delete, undo, blah, 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 blah. Like, at least half of that does not belong there. Right? It's screaming to go into controllers, presenters, view models, whatever. Right? So if you see yourself using that region nice feature too much, better watch out, because you're probably hiding a lot of junk behind those regions, right? Now, that's not enough. Like I've mentioned before, if you see regions, not just inside classes, but inside methods, Jesus Christ. right? Like this one. Look at the cyclomatic complexity on this method. 24. There are regions in there. One for historical, one for responsibility, one for approval. Why aren't those things separate methods? One method that is process historical data. The other one that is do whatever with the responsibility data, right? Put those into smaller methods, right? Because that method is probably doing an awful lot one more time, right? It's just beyond me. So let's look at, I actually have that code in here. So let's suffer a little bit because, you know, come on, I've suffered putting this stuff together. You guys have to be sympathetic and endure the pain with me here. Let's see. Yeah, it's this one. Right, so what was that?
We feel your pain.
Thank you. But that's not enough. I need to give you more. Right? There we go. Right, so what's behind that historical region? Ha, guess what? Right? No bad code goes, you know, without a switch statement in there. Or more than one, of course. Right? So you have that switch statement. Responsibility. If, else if. Oh, if and else if. That's not a switch statement. It's similar. It's like 6, half a dozen. Right? It's right there. Approved. You know, the guy's hiding an if block. What for? Right? It makes no sense. And then remaining. That's the part that scares me. If. See? Do you feel the love, brother? Exactly. It's like remaining because I got tired of coming up with funny names. Right? It's just...
Kitchen sink.
Exactly. Right, so I had that one. And let's see. Oops. Right, there's this other one. Again, look at that one. So regions inside the method. Oops, what happened there? Oh, cool. Right, so you have regions inside the method, and you have an if block that has other regions. Right, look at the cyclomatic complexity going through the roof one more time. So let's look at those methods as well. That would be here. Right, so of course you have like useless comments in there. We retrieve the email settings from app config. Yeah, I can read the code and see that you're retrieving settings. You don't have to tell me that. Right? We override the email address. Well, I can see that you're setting the email address, so why bother telling me about those things? Keep going, right? So there's one region there. If, right? Look at the catch block in there. Catch, null reference, argument exception, broken, just regular exception, and then another region in there. And then you notice, if you've memorized that try catch, let's wait for my computer to catch up here. Oh, it's going slow. It's the computer going like, oh boy. Oops. Right, so if you look at every single one of those regions, they are hiding the fact that this try-catch, it's exactly the same every time. It shows up like 3 or 4 times inside the same method. Come on! Right? How hard is it to move that into a separate method? Please. Right? If you have to do that manually, okay, there's a little bit of typing that you have to do. But if you're using Visual Studio, you can select that text, go to the refactor menu up there, and say extract method. And it's going to do that for you. So there are tools that you can use that you just push buttons and code is going to fly all over the screen. It's very cool. It looks like playing video game. Right? I don't know if you've messed with like Code Rush, for instance. I can select this block of code here. As long as my computer catches up, right? I can hit a shortcut in here. Did I do it? Yeah, oh, I know why my computer is kind of crazy. It's because I'm recording it through Camtasia. Ah, hello. Yeah, it's catching up. See how it's blinking? Okay, you're back to life, my friend. Let's not wait on that. But anyways, the tool is going to essentially tell you, okay, you want to extract this method. Where do you want to put it? And then you can go with the keys and say, okay, I want to put it up here or down here. Hit enter. Right? It moves that block of code for you. It passes variables into that method as parameters in case they are needed in that code block. So there's just no reason not to clean up the code. There's absolutely no reason not to do it. Let's see. Oops. Is it back? Hello. All right. Let's see. Okay, I've already shown you that code, so that's good. Vertical distance. Declare things close to where they are used. Right? I don't know if you remember back in the days when we used to do procedural programming, we would declare like 500 variables at the top of the program and then write like 5,000 lines of code, and then it would be down there, right? So essentially you see the variables declared at the top, and then you start scanning the code down, and then you find some place in code where it's referring to some variable, and you're like, what was the type of that variable? What is the reason why it's there? Because I remember when the variable was declared, there was a comment. So you have to walk all the way up, read the thing, come back, but then as you're coming back, you find another part of the code that is like, oh, this part is interesting. I don't even remember what I'm doing anymore. But, okay, it's like, yeah, I remember that I went up. So let me go up there. And it's like, oh, okay, I think I remember. So let me go down there. It's like, how did I get there to begin with? What was I doing before? Right? So you go like, do I have a little thing here? Right? You get, right? I don't know about you, but I feel drowsy when I read code like this. Right? Read a little bit, go there, up, down. It's like a crazy ride at the amusement park. So we don't need to do that anymore. Declare things close together as they belong together. So if you have a bigger method that you want to create smaller methods, you extract the smaller method and put it right underneath the method that was the origin for that sub-method. Right? So they kind of go together. And as you're reading your class, it reads like a book. Right? And eventually you're going to start, okay, I have this method, and it calls method A, B, and C. Okay, I need to understand what method A does. And then you jump into it, and it's like, okay, and then it calls into this one, okay, I don't need to look anymore, right? Because maybe by that time you've already found what you're looking for. Kind of like the way Uncle Bob describes this, it's kind of like reading the newspaper, right? You read the headlines, and it's like, oh, I would like to read a little more. What page? You go there, and then you see the pictures, the subtitles, and then you read like the big letters, and then you may decide whether or not you have to read into more details. Your code should look the same way. People can get a feel as they read the name of the properties, the methods, the variables, and then they should be able to decide, okay, have I seen enough? Am I able to understand what I should expect? Right? Because remember, you're reading this method call, and it's like, the method call says that it's going to do that. If the person has work ethic, you can rely on that function doing what you would expect, right? There's no surprises. Like, for instance, you have a property named color that one would think, okay, if I change that color, it's going to change the color of the object. But then, if besides changing the color, you also change something else, well, that's a problem, right? It's like a problem with, I think we have a problem on that projector there. Oh, it keeps doing that? Ooh. It's like having that model where you have the rectangle class, a square class, and then you make square inherit from rectangle. And then, well, a square is a rectangle, except that when you set the width, you have to change the height. And when you set the height, you have to change the width. Horrible, right? Because if you're using this code polymorphically, you're receiving an instance typed as a rectangle, but it happens to be a square. But you don't know because you're writing polymorphic code. And then you say, okay, if width greater than whatever, I want to set it to something smaller, right? and then you set it, and now all of a sudden, the height changes as well. Ooh. Right? The values of the object, the state of the object changes under your feet because you didn't know about that side effect of the thing. Right? You don't want developers having nasty surprises like that. Let's see how we're doing on time. Oh, that's not bad. Magic numbers, right? So if you see expressions like that, int x equals 5 times 8 times 4. What do those numbers mean? They can mean anything, right? I don't know. It may depend on the context. What does this application do? What does this method do, right? I mean, how hard is it to create smaller, variables? Name the variables after the thing. So you see, okay, hours worked last month equals days per week times hours per day times weeks last month, right? I mean, it's a no-brainer. You don't have to think about it. You read through it as you read English, right? There's no surprises there. And still a lot of people don't do that. Again, and if you use refactoring tools, you can essentially select the pieces of your code, and then you can hit a shortcut and say introduce local or introduce constant. And it's going to create a constant or a local variable for you. You can start typing, and it's going to replace the thing with a constant or a variable and name the things. And as you type the name in one place, it changes on the other. Right? It's very easy.
Is it possible this piece of code could have been written in Code? And they didn't have tools to assist them in typing?
Who on their sane minds would use Notepad to write code? Right? Could it, you can pop up Notepad and write code and then use the command line compiler to compile the code and you have your app, but really, who does that?
Well, this is something Linux.
Was that?
This is a Linux.
But they don't have Notepad.
Yeah, exactly. Right, so those. Now, with that being said, right, in this one book that I'm going to recommend you guys all read, when the author talks about magic numbers, he says, well, if you have this situation like this, you're going to rename variables. But if you have some code and then he has this number in there, everybody knows what that is, and you don't have to put that behind a variable. I don't know. I didn't know what that number is. How many of you guys know what that number represents? So how many? It's like 4 or 5 of you. Is everybody non-American here? I don't think so, right? I mean, the guy's point is, yeah, everybody should know. Well, maybe every American would know, but like we've just seen, it's not the case at all, right? I mean, I don't use miles, square, gallons, all these nonsense, measurement. I use meters, kilos, centimeters, and all that. That's what makes sense to me, right? So do not take for granted that people are going to know things that are specific to your culture. Why is that important? In a day and age when we have outsourcing work going, and not just necessarily outsourcing. You may have a Brazilian working on your team who speaks kilometers, right? Spell it out. Do not take for granted that the guy is going to know something that's specific to, your regional culture. Very important concept. It was the one point where I really disagreed with the author on that book. It's like, no, dude, that was bad. Like, there's something wrong in that picture. The one on the left, the one on the right, I know there's something wrong there. What's wrong about that piece of code in there? The whole idea of writing such a code is already wrong, right? And that one, I did it. Right? A couple of years ago. That was, 5 or 6 years ago. Right? I was reading through this and I was like,
So it's never secure.
It's never secure.
And you can never make it secure.
Exactly. It's like, it's the kind of stuff that we should not do. Because now a user takes in that class and, says, okay, my object dot is secure equals true. And the guy expects that to do what it's supposed to. And it doesn't. Why did I wrote that in that way to begin with? I have no idea, dude. That was, like I said, 5, 6 years ago. I look back at this and it's like, I just cannot see an excuse as to why that was. I don't think that was the case. I remember that this is part of a subclass of a class, our setting system, where we have a mode of that settings component that can work with settings that are in memory. And under that situation, the is-secure property is meaningless. So it always returns false because it's definitely not secure because it's in memory and it's not encrypted. And setting it is not going to make it more secure, right? Unless maybe I had some mechanism to encrypt the data that was there. The bottom line is that abstraction was wrong, right? Because for that subclass, is secure didn't make any sense, right? So I had to fix that abstraction, right? Because there I was violating Liskov all over the place. Something to keep in mind, right? So if you have to override something and just like blank out that behavior on a subclass, it's probably because you're getting the abstraction wrong, right? It's because the class should not inherit that member. If somebody has the motivation to inherit just to, blank out what it does, that's just bad, right? More burritos there. I've lost track. Even though we did take one memory dump, right? So I don't know if you guys are keeping track of that. Resources that I want to mention, and since we have more time, that's good. We're going to talk about some other things. But resources I want to mention. Clean Code, right? This book is excellent, right? The author is going to walk you through several practices about, how do you clean up your code? What things should you be looking for? What techniques can you apply to your code to clean it up, right, as you go? So I cannot recommend enough that book, and it's like just 250, 280 pages, something like that. Implementation Patterns by Kent Beck. I really like that book. Most design patterns book, they are about the high level, right? They all say it doesn't matter how you write your code to implement the thing, you have to think about the higher level picture of it. Implementation Patterns, the book, it covers the other part, which is, okay, you already know the patterns, now you have to actually write down the code, right? That book's going to tell you, which flavors of implementation for the code. How do you do your constructors? How do you do your methods? Do you have temporary coupling or temporal coupling between methods within your class? Things like that. So I also recommend it. It's a very short book, 100 and something pages. And then finally, Refactoring by Martin Fowler. Excellent, right? Several techniques as to how do you go from, how you change your code around to you improve its structure without changing its behavior. So very good book in there. Before we go into the summary, now I want to go back to Visual Studio. And man, I've been talking a lot. Please ask questions. Or say comments. If you guys think that I'm just out of my mind, go ahead and say it. I'm all up for learning.
Well, you seem to speak disparagingly of the switch statement. Could you explain why?
So why do I despise the switch statement so much? Every time you have switch statements, you are very likely to have immense blocks of code within each switch block, right? People are going to just keep adding more and more code to it, right? Some are going to take the trouble of, okay, let me extract that block so that I say switch, I don't have a switch here, switch on this variable, case this value, call this method, case this other value, call this method. So at least you can see all the switch parts in there. That would be okay, but that's not normally how people do things. Also, because you have code that may vary depending on which branch you are going through, it means that if that switch block has any reason to change by adding steps to it or removing, you're going to have to change that part of the code, right? And the more you have to change, the bigger the problem you may have there.
Well, I started out with the premise that my procedure fits on the screen. Okay, so my switch block, I don't see how it can get out of hand.
Oh, it can. Developers have the power to do that. It's amazing. Everything that starts off as like, yeah, don't worry, this is a one-liner. It takes no time for somebody to say, oh no, you have to check whether the guy is an admin. If block. Oh no, you have to check because if the guy is an admin, you have to check for this, otherwise you have to check for that, or you have to check for these other things. So what used to be a one-liner, it gets bloated.
I can see examples of what you consider to be good comments.
Good comments? Okay, we'll get there. Let me just see, there's a hand raised here.
I would like to add what you're saying
Yeah.
to address this question.
Uh-huh.
Uncle Bob talks about the open-close principle. And this open-close means you're open to extension, but closed to change. So you would want to avoid changing existing code, but extend the code by adding new methods and new classes, that sort of thing. With a switch statement, if you've got a switch statement with 4 scenarios, 4 cases, chances are you've got switch of some variable in 20 places in your code. I'm just saying as an example, okay? If you have to add another case, that means you have to go to 20 places in your code to add that case, because now you've added a new value that variable can have. Okay, so over here you've got to add that case, what do I do here? Over here you've got to add that case, what do I do here? The way that you address that is you introduce different classes, and each class might implement an interface. And then if you have a new case to that switch, instead of it being, having to go in 20 places in the code, you just add another class that implements that interface.
Well, so you're not speaking in support of else if.
No, I'm not speaking because else if is the same, it's really basically the same thing.
Yeah, it's still the same thing. The approach, that's an excellent example, right? So the approach that you're proposing is applying the strategy pattern. Right, so you have an interface that represents your strategy, and then instead of having that switch statement, you have just this one object that comes in polymorphically that you're going to say object.some method, right? The implementation may vary because each class that implements that strategy is going to have a different algorithm that's going to get called. If you need to add or delete parts of that logic, it may be like text calculation, right? That you may want to add rules or subtract rules. All you have to do is to either add or remove a class. You don't have to go around the app changing switch statements and things like that.
But granted, you still somewhere, like a factory method or something like that, somewhere there is some conditional logic to determine which version of this interface you're going to instantiate.
Right. There may be, and that is if you're not using like a smart factory that's using reflection to load classes on the fly, so you could potentially extend your app without even recompiling it. Right, you just drop a class on an assembly within the folder, and the app is just smart enough to say, okay, let me pick that up. If it has a class that implements a specific strategy, just add it to the system. Right? So look into, if that sounds confusing, look into a strategy pattern and factory. They usually go together, and they come to solve, removing those switch statements that usually, they may start small, but they tend to grow bigger. Right?
When you're talking about the narrator comment and stuff, rarely I think the developer would code the line and also put that. Usually it's probably from the fact that they kind of pseudo-coded and then came back and did all the actual code afterwards. Mm-hmm. Now, are you saying that if someone did that, like they pseudo-coded with comments, I guess, and then they came back and encoded, you should delete all those comments, or?
Absolutely, or even better than that, instead of writing that kind of code, do test-driven development, where you're going to spec things out through your test, right? So you're going to say, okay, I'm going to need to call a method here, pass in a parameter there, and expect the following result. So you have valid code that does not rot, because code or comment, it has a tendency to rot, because people are going to change the code itself and not update the comment. That's what ends up happening, right? So the comment that you're reading, it says that it's doing something, but then you see it's like, no, that's not at all what the code is doing, right? So there's no point into doing that. So there was a question, how do we write good comment, right? So one thing I forgot to mention before is that, right, and I'm guilty of that myself. A couple of years ago, I subscribed to this notion that every member inside a class should have comments, regardless whether it's protected, public, private. I've even written a rule, an FXCOP rule, to check for that. right? So then somebody very smart created this tool called GhostDoc, that if you have a method that say is I don't know, get customers, let's say that this returns a data set or something along those lines, get customers by region, and then you take in a region. And you want to document that, there is this plugin, you hit, I think it's Control-Shift-D, or, hello, is it doing anything there? Oops. Yeah, I don't remember the shortcut, but you do that and see what it does. It creates the comment for you. Gets the customers by region. Oh, that's pretty good. Right? It parses out, provided that you've named your method well, parses it out and does a pretty good job, and then sees the parameter and says, yeah, the parameter is the region. So it's okay.
But if you've named your method well, do you really need
Exactly, right? So if you've named your method well, do you need that comment at all? Probably not, right? What kind of code would be good then? If it's a private method, no code is the answer. Or no comment is the answer. You don't need comment for that. If it is a public API, by all means, write good comment. Do not write something like, the get customers by region gets the customers by region. That I know. Right? Give me something else. Why would I use this method? Are there specific scenarios that the developer has thought of and say, well, if you are under this circumstance, this is the method that you want to call, and maybe even like put a sample or something like that, right? So good comment is comment that's going to tell you why you would be using that kind of method for public members. For internal things, sometimes you're going to have to write comment. It may be because just by reading the code, it's still not clear why you've taken that path, right? Because there may be like another path that one would say, I'm reading this code and I would think, or everybody would think, I would do it this way, but the developer did it a different way. Why? It may be because of performance reasons, security reasons. So that you write a comment for. You say, I did this, or this is done like this because of blah, right? If you do the normal thing that everybody would expect, you will have a performance hit that we cannot afford in this app, right? That's what a good comment would give you. Something that it is valuable and not something like that. So now going back to this tool, so it does that, but it does some priceless things. Like, for instance, you know how some people call a method something like my method, right? And then you get let me get the comment there. What does it do there? The comment? Well, it mice the method. Whatever the heck that means, right? I don't think it's proper English, but I don't know. I mean, but wait, there's more. And I've seen this. Now this one comes from real-world experience. There was a method called, this guy come back to life, called additional info. Yeah, exactly. Additionals the info is what it would do. I don't know why it's taking time to think. But the developer did just that. He used the tool to create the auto-generated comments, which is, well, it's great. Now the code is commented. I'm not going to get a compiler error or anything. But read the comment. Additionals the info? The heck does that mean? Right? I mean, it means that for that thing, the tool is good. Because if you read the comment, it's like, whoa, if it's doing this, it's probably because the name of my method is not that great. Right? Because a method with that name, it means it's a property, right, that contains additional info. It's not a method that's executing anything. It's just garbage. Right? So keep an eye into that. Let's see. Other questions?
Sure. So assuming we understand a lot of the basics of refactoring and various solid principles and whatnot, what approach would you take if you're encountering code that is just really bad. And like, you're just looking at it and you're like, I'm not even sure where to start. I mean, it's like, it's hard to see any patterns in it and that sort of thing. What would you do?
Who said I quit? Yeah, that's...
And rewrite it so the next person doesn't have to suffer through it.
So one of the things that, one of the practices that we have, and it's part of one of my slides here. Where the heck did it go? Should be that guy. Right, so this rule here, the Boy Scout rule, right? Leave the campground cleaner than you found. Right, so every time we check code out and we are messing with it, try to improve it a little bit to have it cleaner than it was before. Now, granted, if the code base is like, it looks like it's beyond hope, like Jay said, maybe we want to quit. I mean, are you really up for the challenge? I mean, I've quit jobs before because of that. I was just like, dude, I'm going to give you this example. Let me make sure that I choose my words right here, because it may sound offensive to some, and we have kids in the audience. I was hired to fix this one. It's hard to not say bad words here. To fix this one system. And then the users were complaining that we were seeing some rude messages here and there. Well, it turns out that the developer, he used to name variables after bad names. Like, so user would be, and it was on a dynamic language, so sometimes it would not find a variable, so the app would blow up and it would say, like, person's genitalia not found. Yeah. The moment I saw that, I said, I don't want to even touch this code. I'm sorry. I mean, unless you people are paying me a whole lot of money, I don't want to be involved with this. Right? Because it's wrong from the ground up. Right? So that's one thing. Right? Now, if you are up for the challenge and, you have to stick with it, what I would do is, have you read Michael Fedor's book on working with legacy code? It's called Working Effectively with Legacy Code. That's the kind of stuff that the guy teaches you, right? So you have this legacy code, which by his definition is code that does not have any tests, right? Because legacy code, at first when I read the title of the book, I thought, legacy code, well, maybe it's COBOL, things like, because that's what I thought. It's like, well, it's old stuff. And then, like the first page, the guy describes, no, legacy code, my definition of it is code that does not have tests, which means it's hard to change, right? Because you don't want to change because you're afraid of messing things up. So then now I tell myself, okay, I think of legacy code as, code that you run away from. It's the code that you look at and it's like, I don't want to touch. I don't care whether it was written 20 years ago or this morning. If it doesn't have tests and I cannot see what it's doing, it's legacy code, right? So he teaches you the techniques looking at this code. Okay, you have this one 2,000 line code method that performs, the world in there. So what do? Well, first thing, write an integration test for that method and make sure that it exercises all the branches of that method. It's not a unit test. It's going to touch the database. It's going to do whatever. But at least it's going to validate what's there so that now you can start pulling stuff out. And that's your thing. If you have the test, you can start pulling stuff into separate methods, separate classes, use different strategies and patterns, because now you have the test to protect it. Now, is that easy? No, not at all. Right? Because depending on the dependencies that block of code has, it may be murder trying to write any kind of test to it. So you may have to resort to tools like TypeMock, which can mock anything, like static classes, private fields, everything. Right? At least you have a framework that you can mock out the dependencies and test just that block of code, and then start refactoring from there. So that would be the recommendation. Cool? Questions?
I've always gotten the feeling with good commenting is a little bit like a Goldilocks and Three Bears. Can't be a little bit too much of this way or this way, and it's got to be just right.
Yeah.
Very hard to hit that.
It is, yeah.
And the ultimate thought I've had is that sometimes you need to add a little redundancy. your system. I know you're talking about the redundancy is ugly, but the way to
What kind of
minimize-
redundancy?
Well, for example, saying something more than once.
Saying something more than
Yeah,
once in
like
comment?
An extra, something like that. And the only reason I bring this up is that sometimes the human mind takes longer to pull something out.
I would be more into the mindset of if I make the name of the method very succinct where people, they may read the name of the method and don't get the first time, so they're going to have to read the name of the method one more time, so be it. It's better than having the comment in there because you may end up changing the name of the method to better describe what it does and forgetting to update the comment. So now the name of the method says one thing and the comment says another. I've seen that all over the place, right? Because as we go through code, we say, well, you know, this method, I said that it gets this, but it's really doing something else. You change the name of the method, you never change the comment, right? There goes the redundancy, right? Because now you stop believing the code that you are reading, and you're just like, okay, I'm going to start ignoring comments altogether.
So you think lack of redundancy just makes it a little bit more bulletproof in terms of
Yeah,
comprehensibility?
exactly. Yeah,
You like Y comments rather than Y comments.
exactly. Right, because the what, the name of the method should tell you. It does this, it gets that. Right, so that I can read that.
Tell you need to rename the method.
Exactly. Right, and here's the thing, I mean, us programmers, most of us, we are terrible communicators. And that's why sometimes it's so hard to come up with good names. It is a skill that we all have to have. Right? Developers who are not good at communicating, you have to improve that because our code has to speak to the reader.
A couple of other comments about the comments. I think how obviously you want to avoid. You want to say how you're doing something because the how can change, even if the purpose of the method isn't changing. And then if you're having trouble with the name of a method, you know, putting in the name of the method, what its purpose is, chances are the method's doing too much. And you can break
Exactly.
it out into something that's more succinct, so you can
Yep.
more easily name each step. Or
Yeah, that's an excellent point, and it's right on. If you're having trouble naming something, it is likely that it's doing more than it should, right? So it's doing more than one thing. Therefore, well, the method does this and that and get this and get that. That's your problem, right? Make something smaller.
On this comment thing, I think there may also be a problem here that there's a class of people with gray hair that started out programming with a restriction of 6 character names. And back then, we had to put stuff in comments because you can't put a whole lot in 6 characters.
Yeah, I come from that time. Not anymore, right?
Right, we have to get over that.
Yeah, that's right.
You don't have gray hair.
That I do, believe me. I've been married for 13 years. So, and I have a 9-year-old. So yeah, I do have gray hair. I just hide it well. So here, yeah, so, exactly. So here's the thing that I brought up in the beginning of the presentation. If you are a developer doing this for 20 years, but doing year 1 for 20 years, you know, you got stuck in time. You have to keep moving forward. Right, so on some of the summary notes that I had there, right, be a little more careful with the code you write, you know, care about the code that you write. Read other people's code, right? You don't learn, writing books unless you read books. You're not going to get good at writing code if you don't read code, not just yours, but somebody else's. That's how you're going to learn different styles, good things, bad things. You're going to be like, oh, no, I don't want to read anything by this guy anymore. Right? Read those books, follow the Boy Scout rule. And other than that, I will still stick around for a little longer, but that's my contact information one more time. Please, today, tomorrow, whenever you have a chance, go to this site and just rate the session, post some comments, suggestions. I would really appreciate. Other than that, thank you very much for sticking around. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Just want to let you guys know that Zane found